Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing an Open Grade League team that is objectively not a good team. This team features Colossal as the lead, Shadow Drain Punch Sableye as the save switch, and Azumarill as the closer. I put together this team as a laugh live on stream, just to have a fun team to run some games with, and against all odds, I was able to go 10-4 with the team. Now, I do want to reiterate, this is definitely not a team I recommend anyone trying for themselves, as it's not a very good team, but against all odds, the wins kept piling up. So, without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a terrible lead, Colossal into Stunfisk. I throw one Fire Spin, Safe Switch into Shadow Sableye, and my opponent's gonna stay in with the Stunfisk and fire off energy. Now, this is not your normal Sableye. This Sableye is running Drain Punch. Shadow Charizard, their switch in, is very frail, so they have to respect the foul play, and that allows me to get a Drain Punch shielded, and suddenly, my Sableye's defense is dramatically increased. This is going to make Sableye very difficult to farm down. Charizard baits with the Air Cutter, I immediately return fire with the foul play gets the connect, and I'm able to win switch advantage. In comes Shadow Venusaur, but due to the defense buff, Shadow Sableye hangs on, making it to the foul play, and Sableye just completely took over this game. Now I can send in the bulky Colossal, absorb Frenzy Plant, and then Azumarill should be able to clean up the Stunfisk in the back. In comes Stunfisk, I immediately pivot into Azumarill, and this game should be over. Ideally, I do want to try and take multiple charge attacks in this matchup because I want to try and burn the switch timer. This Azumarill is not running Ice Beam, it's running Play Rough and Hydro Pump, and that means I am unfortunately walled by Venusaur. By taking 2 discharges and now going for the Hydro Pump, I have almost burned my switch timer. Hydro Pump will easily knock out the Stunfisk. Back in comes the Venusaur, switch timer comes up, and back in comes Colossal. Venusaur would need to make it 2 back-to-back Frenzy Plans to take the win, and they just simply don't have enough energy. Sludge is shielded, Flame Charge is reached, and that's going to be a Game 1 win. We saw one of the worst possible leads that we could see, Colossal into Stunfisk, but the Drain Punch Sableye completely took over the mid-game and secured us the win. The bad leads continue in game number 2, leading Colossal into Pangoro. I save switch into Shadow Sableye, which is normally helpless in this matchup, but once again, I'm running Drain Punch. Drain Punch is a nasty surprise, and that hits for massive super effective damage onto Pangoro. Pangoro is at the back-to-back Night Slashes, but because of the defense boost, Sableye is able to very comfortably tank the first. I'm going to look to shield the second and fully farm down. My opponent pivots into Grumpig, and oh my goodness, they are core broken to smithereens by Drain Punch Sableye. I go for a very greedy bait, the bait pays off, my opponent goes for Dynamic Punch, but this is resisted and I'm double boosted. Dynamic Punch does basically nothing, and now I can fire off the foul play. Foul play will be secure in the knockout, my opponent puts up the final shield, they have to try and farm down, but the boosted Sableye, it just will not get KO'd. It makes it to another charge attack, foul play knocks out the Grumpig, and the immortal Sableye strikes again. Pangoro gets the farm down, in comes Azumarill, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to game number 3, picking up the best lead that we've seen so far, which is Colossal into Corsola. I throw a Fire Spin, Safe Switch into my Sableye, and unfortunately, I am immediately met with Tinkaton. While Drain Punch is going to boost up my Sableye's defense, unfortunately, this is never a matchup that I can flip, unless my opponent makes a mistake, and they just did. They threw a Bulldoze on 6, they did not build up to a Gigaton Hammer, so I simply just never have to respect it. Now I go for a second Drain Punch, and this time I'm able to get a shield. I'm now double boosted on Sableye, and I can very comfortably survive a Bulldoze. I put up the shield, they go for the Gigaton Hammer, and it looks like I will actually be able to flip this matchup. My opponent unfortunately got a few shield calls wrong by not building up to the Gigaton before going for the Bulldoze bait. I did not have to respect it. They send in Feraligatr to try and farm down, and the immortal Sableye makes the foul play, dealing huge damage onto that Feraligatr. Unfortunately, my Colossal really cannot do a lot in this game, except for be a damage sponge for power gems from the Glaring Corsola. Corsola will fire off a power gem. I have to no shield because my opponent has a Feraligatr. Feraligatr is going to absolutely shred Colossal with a Hydro Cannon. I go for the Flame Charge, and arguably this is a misplay. Rock Slide is 5-4, whereas Flame Charge is 5-5, so unfortunately I will actually get outpaced. I put up the shield, and I really have to hope that my opponent's timer is not yet up. The timer comes up, but it's only enough to switch in. It's not enough to actually throw the energy. Rock Slide takes the knockout. I'm boosted. I'm just going to stay on the field. Colossal is going to fully farm down the Corsola, and somehow this ragtag team puts together another win. We get the Dream lead in the next match, Colossal into Shadow Talonflame. After leading into so many terrible matchups, it was about time that Colossal finally won a lead. Colossal, it has absolutely no coverage to speak of whatsoever. It's very feast or famine. The fact that my opponent is staying in Talonflame into Colossal tells me they are very core broken by Colossal in the back. My guess is this is probably the Talonflame, Lickilicky, and Go-Go team. If my opponent had a very hard answer to Colossal in the back, like let's say a Quagsire, they never would have stayed in such a bad lead matchup if they had Lickilicky and Quagsire as two Pokemon in the back that actually beat the Colossal. So the fact that they stayed in clues me into the fact that it's something that's going to be weak to that Colossal. They land Shadow Ball, I'm going to lose Charge Attack priority, and this is going to be very close. I have a very high rank Azumarill, come on Azumarill, Azumarill does barely hang on, and I'm able to get my Play Rough. Play Rough should be knocking out the Lickilicky, and I'm just going to look to pivot into Colossal as it is revealed to be that Go-Goat. At this point, this game is over. I can boost up my attack with the Flame Charge and make life absolutely miserable for this core. Go-Goat farms up a ton of energy. Leaf Blade would not knock out here, and I know that I can survive it, so I'm always going to be no-shielding. I have to watch for my opponent to try and catch a move, but at this point, I can just win the game by throwing Rock Slide at everything. So, I farm up, they go for the catch onto the Talonflame, but I can just go for the Rock Slide. Talonflame, it's gonna get one-hit KO, that's boosted and double super effective. Back in comes the Go-Goat, Colossal gets the shield and a full farm down. Boosted Fire Spins going crazy, and that's a good game. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty tricky lead Colossal into Firro. While Drill Run does not one-shot, it is double super effective, but my opponent's actually the one to pivot out. They save switch into Furret. A very common team structure right now is Flyer, Furret, and a Quagsire. So I'm just going to stay in with the Colossal. Colossal is insanely bulky. That is the one thing it has going for it. It doesn't have great moves, but what it does have is just an absolutely stupid stat product, and that's going to allow it to absolutely dominate these neutral matchups, like against Furret. Furret goes to the Trailblaze, I undertap the Rock Slide, and now my opponent has to decide, do they want switch advantage? They say yes, they put up the shield, they get a full farm down, but now it's actually going to be my turn to go for a farm down with the Immortal Sableye. I'm going to have to give up a shield because this double boosted Trailblaze would absolutely delete my Sableye from the field of play, but now I have a ton of energy, and that's going to make life very uncomfortable for the Firro when they bring it in. My opponent sends in not a Quagsire, but a Gastrodon. Gastrodon, it's pretty terrible post Mud Slap nerf. Foul Play is going to easily pick up the 2-hit KO, and if my opponent ever gives up the final shield, then I can just win the game with Azumarill. They do not give up the final shield, they send in the Firro, Sableye not even boosted on its defense, but still able to make it to the Foul Play. Foul Play, no shielded by the Firro, I can just send in Azumarill, and we can very comfortably bubble down and take the win. So it wasn't the Quagsire that I was expecting, but it was still a water ground type. So I do feel vindicated in my team read there, and Firro knows there's just no way to ever win that game, so they will get bubbled down. Unfortunately, we do see Quagsire in the next match, Colossal into Shadow Quagsire. I safe switch it to Sableye, and I'm going to immediately put up the shield here because this is enough for a Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb would do a ton of damage, they do go for the Mud Bomb, and my opponent now sends in Togekiss. This could be enough for a Power Gem, so I will go for the Drain Punch bait, and the bait pays off as I'm able to get a shield from my opponent. Sableye already walls off the energy to Togekiss, so boosting up my defense means that I'm going to survive that Aura Sphere even better now. This time, I don't bait, I'm able to land the Foul Play, and this should set me up to tank one Aura Sphere, shield the second, and then fully Shadow Claw down. I'll exit pretty low, but I will exit with the Charge Attack loaded, and that's very good news for me. So I put up the shield, my opponent sends in Feraligatr, and this is awful news for me. They have ABA Water, and my Colossal is just trapped. There's nowhere it can go. I think the best use of Colossal at this point genuinely is just to be a gigantic damage sponge. I'm hoping in my heart of hearts that Hydro Cannon won't one-shot, but it's double super effective. It's of course going to one-shot, but there's not really a better use for Colossal in this game. Colossal is extremely useless. At this point, with my opponent having a very healthy Quagsire remaining and a pretty healthy Feraligatr with a ton of energy, this game is over. I'm going to play it out just to try and see if there's any potential win con, but realistically there is not. I'm just going to farm up, go for the Play Rough, and they end up catching onto the Togekiss. To be honest, I forgot the Togekiss was alive. In my memory, I had farmed it down, but either way, even without that catch, we were never winning that game as Colossal was very useless there. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty decent lead, Colossal into Lickilicky. Now, a rollout user into a fire type, why is this a decent matchup? Well, that's because Colossal just straight up wins the zeros here. Colossal is able to withstand all the rollouts, the double Shadow Balls, and Colossal is able to actually pick up the 2-hit KO with a Flame Charge into a Rock Slide, or if I want to double boost myself, Flame Charge into Flame Charge. They go for the Shadow Ball, Colossal survives, I make it to Flame Charge number 2, and now my opponent has to decide, do they want switch advantage or do they want shield advantage? They decide to give up switch advantage and instead go for a farm down with Dondozo. Dondozo is an incredibly cool Pokemon. It always has way more play than people expect, but unfortunately, I have one of the hardest Dondozo counters in the game with Azumarill. Azumarill is a complete wall to Dondozo, as Dondozo runs Surf and Outrage. I do feel pretty bad because Dondozo is one of my favorite Pokemon. I really like Dondozo. I really like using Dondozo in the Go Battle League, and it feels bad that my beloved Dondozo is getting so thoroughly walled off by Azumarill. But I couldn't really afford to send in the Sableye because Dondozo, it is very oppressive in neutral matchups. The Sableye would have gotten overrun. Play rough lands, Dondozo survives. In the back is Togekiss. At this point, I can just go straight Drain Punch on my Sableye. My opponent can never afford to no-shield the first just because a resisted foul play would do way too much damage. So they're forced to shield a double resisted Drain Punch, and now my Sableye is boosted up on defense. I did put up the shield there, covering for my opponent's only win con, which was them landing a Rogue Dazzling Gleam, but they are running the more traditional set, which is going to be Aura Sphere and Psyshock. My opponent still has energy loaded on the Dondozo. Dondozo does have a Surf banked, so my opponent's play will be to try and grab the final shield and then go for a combination play with the Dondozo. So I just blind throw the foul play as they try and snipe with Dondozo. Sableye wins charge attack priority, and we're able to take the knockout. My defense is boosted, so I'm going to stay in to get as much Shadow Claw damage as I possibly can. One bubble from Azumarill farms down the Togekiss, and we're able to get the win. We move to the next match, leading Colossal into Skeledirge. This is an incredibly good lead. My opponent save switches into Malamar, and I'm actually very slow in counter switching into the Sableye. You'll notice from my tapping towards the top of the screen that I was actually doing this battle with the phone turned upside down live on Twitch. I do stream basically every day over on Twitch. If you haven't checked it out yet, feel free to stop by. It's usually some pretty entertaining battles. So this battle does have the extra difficulty of being upside down. So that's why, unfortunately, I was very slow on the counter swap there because it takes longer to figure out what gets switched in and where your switch buttons are. So my opponent can't really afford to send to the Skeledirge here. They bring in Pangoro, and Pangoro is about to lose so much HP from Drain Punch. Drain Punch lands, Pangoro survives, but takes monster damage, and now I can just send in Azumarill. Pangoro will fire off the close combat, and I'm just going to instantly cue a switch into Colossal as Skeledirge hits the field. That gives me a 0-turn switch, so I'm not behind any energy when Skeledirge hits the field. Rock Slide will pressure a shield, but the bulk of Colossal is going to be what my opponent just simply cannot contend with in this endgame. They can fire off the Shadow Ball, but Colossal tanks it effortlessly. Colossal is never getting incinerated down. That double fire resist coming in clutch. Rock Slide will get the final shield, and when shields are down, Azumarill is just going to be completely unbeatable. I no-shield Colossal, Shadow Ball will take the knockout, but now I can just send in Azumarill. The bubbles continue to add up more and more. They pivot into Pangoro, but before Pangoro is able to make another move, I can just fire off the Play Rough. Play Rough is massive overkill onto Pangoro. Back in comes Skeledirge, but unfortunately for them, Skeledirge just simply cannot knock out from here with the Shadow Ball. So I no-shield because their only win con would be having a shielded Torch Song into a boosted Shadow Ball knocking me out. I make the Play Rough KOs the Skeledirge, and we get another win. Hopping into the final match, leading Colossal into Medicham. This is a truly terrible lead. I save switch into Azumarill, and so far my opponent's not pivoting out. Medicham is completely walled here. Medicham banks a massive amount of energy, and out comes Tinkaton. Unfortunately, I do mistime my Hydro Pump there, and I end up accidentally throwing on alignment. Hydro Pump still does massive damage onto the Tinkaton, but you never really want to give free energy to a Pokemon that's as spammy as Tinkaton. Each Fairy Wind gives them 9 energy, and because I threw on alignment, I now have to throw my Play Rough on alignment again, or my opponent's just simply going to outpace. The good news is, because my opponent gave me such a big energy head start, I am actually able to get a shield advantage out of this mid game, and I'm hoping that my opponent is in 1 Fire Spin range, so I won't have to take a Bulldoze. I send in Colossal, but they live on 1 HP. Tinkaton is so incredibly bulky, and that double super effective damage is going to land. I need to trust in Sableye to close out the game. I send Sableye into Medicham, and Medicham stays into Fire Off energy. They have back-to-back Ice Punches, so I have to let one go. My opponent switches out, and they have a Fortress in the back. Unfortunately, this game feels over. My opponent can just Sand Tomb debuff my life away. I go for the foul play, they don't shield, and my opponent makes a huge misplay. They play to a CMP tie that they do not win. Foul play is shielded. This should be the Rock Tomb. I'm just gonna let this go and try and go for a Fire Spin down. Fire Spin is double super effective. They desperately need to make the Sand Tomb, and they're unable to get there. Medicham has a ton of energy, but so does Colossal, and the game comes down to this. Can Medicham make 3 dynamic punches before I can make 2 flame charges? Medicham finally starts throwing energy, but at this point, they just don't have enough in the tank to take the win. They can force both shields, but Colossal is always going to outpace. So I double shield Colossal, my boosted flame chart is now available, and somehow, against all odds, we're able to win that game. Colossal into Tinkaton, and a Sableye Azumarill backline into their Volt Switch Fortress and Tinkaton backline, and we're able to get the win. If I had to describe today's team in one word, it would be this: confusion. I am absolutely baffled at how this team ended up going 10-4 when starting at an ELO that was ranked inside the top 100 players in the world. This team is objectively, by every measure, a bad team. Colossal, not a particularly strong Pokemon, and has absolutely no flexibility to speak of. Drain Punch Sableye, even with the surprise factor of Drain Punch, Sableye doesn't see a lot of play in a very fairy heavy meta with a lot of Tinkaton, a lot of Wigglytuff as well, and Azumarill as the most normal Pokemon on the team, but Azumarill stocks have taken a hit because Azumarill, not a big fan of Tinkaton, not a big fan of all the Fortress that are going around, but nevertheless, somehow, against all odds, this team ended up going super positive. I normally like to post teams that I think could be good climbing teams, where people can use it to help rank up, hit legend, just hit a new ELO that they've never hit before. This team is not that team. This team had no business doing what it did. Against all odds, terrible lead after terrible lead. A lot of games kept being flipped by the Drain Punch Shadow Sableye. This is tech that could only work in a closed team sheet format like the Go Battle League. In the Pokemon Go Championship Series, which is the official competitive circuit for Pokemon Go PvP, they use open team sheet format, which means your opponent would know coming into a match that you don't have Power Gem for their Togekiss, and they wouldn't have to shield. So in a way, I do enjoy closed team sheet formats for the Go Battle League, because it can allow for that surprise factor, and there were so many games that were flipped because opponents shielded Drain Punches anticipating it was either a Dazzling Gleam or a Power Gem, and it ended up being a heavily resisted move that boosted up my Sableye and gave me that competitive edge. And that information asymmetry is something that I do really enjoy about the Go Battle League. So, to sum it up, was this team good? Absolutely not. Did it win? Yes, it did. Should you try this team? Definitely not, but hey, hopefully it was a very fun team to watch. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.